Have you ever noticed this strange pattern? The more patient you are, the more they hurt you. You stay calm, you forgive, you give second chances, and instead of gratitude, they take it as a green light to do it all again. Let's get one thing straight. Not everyone deserves your kindness. Some people aren't confused. They're calculating. And when you offer them compassion, they see it not as strength, but as weakness they can manipulate. They'll smile while draining your energy. They'll praise your big heart right before they test how far they can break it. And if you're not careful, your silence becomes their playground. Your tolerance becomes their weapon. Now, I'm not here to tell you to hate anyone. Stoic philosophy doesn't preach revenge, but it also doesn't tell you to be a doormat. Marcus Aurelius never said stay and suffer. He said you have power over your mind, not outside events. That means you don't have to control them, but you do have the power to walk away. You see, kindness is only powerful when it's protected by boundaries. Unprotected kindness. That's fuel for the narcissist. It tells them you're available to be used again and again. Here's the hard truth we don't like to admit. Sometimes being too nice is just fear wearing a mask. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as the bad guy. But listen, being kind doesn't mean sacrificing your peace. It doesn't mean allowing emotional manipulation to pass as love. So ask yourself this: are you being kind, or are you abandoning yourself in the name of being good? Because once you understand the difference, that's when you stop playing their game. That's when your silence stops being surrender and starts becoming strategy. This video isn't just about recognizing toxic behavior. It's about reclaiming your power, your peace, and your principles without hate, without drama. So stay with me, because what comes next may change how you protect your energy for the rest of your life. Let's break this down. If you've ever tried to reason with someone who constantly twists your words, who brings up things from 5 years ago to justify what they did yesterday, you're not dealing with confusion. You're dealing with manipulation. See, a manipulator isn't interested in truth. They're not looking to solve the issue or clear up a misunderstanding. They're looking for control. And they'll get it by any means necessary. The moment you bring up something that hurt you, they don't say, "I'm sorry." They say you're too sensitive. They don't own up to their actions. They shift the conversation. Suddenly, you're not talking about what they did. You're defending how you feel about it. And the more you explain, the more power you lose. Because in their game, logic is a trap. You think you're building clarity. They're collecting leverage. They'll take your words and twist them into knots, make you repeat yourself until you doubt your own sanity. And by the end of the conversation, you walk away apologizing for bringing it up in the first place. Sound familiar? That's not just a difficult person. That's someone who's trained in psychological redirection. They don't want peace. They want dominance. And here's what makes it worse. The more empathetic, the more self-aware, the more kind you are, the more useful you are as a mirror, they can distort, because you give them something to manipulate. You give them access. And let me ask you this. How many times have you caught yourself explaining over and over again what? Trying to be calm, trying to be fair. That's not communication. That's survival mode. And every time you do it, you're teaching them one thing. You'll tolerate it. Here's where Stoic philosophy comes in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just pretty words. It's a strategy, because manipulators don't need your anger to thrive. They need your engagement. They win when they pull you into emotional combat. They thrive on your confusion. And the moment you step into their arena, the rules are already rigged against you. That's why every explanation makes it worse. You're trying to clarify. They're trying to control. You're bringing honesty. They're bringing tactics. They don't care if they're right. They care if you're rattled. So what's the alternative? It starts with recognizing the pattern. The second a conversation turns into a courtroom and you're the one on trial for feeling hurt, stop, breathe, withdraw. Don't explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You are not here to audition for basic decency. You are not obligated to defend your right to be respected. And most of all, you are not weak for feeling hurt. But you become vulnerable when you keep offering clarity to someone who profits from your confusion. So ask yourself, am I explaining? Or am I being drained? That question alone could change everything. When you're dealing with a manipulator, explaining yourself feels like talking to a wall, except the wall throws guilt back at you. You start calm. You speak from the heart. You're not trying to argue. You just want to be understood. But here's the trap. They don't want to understand you. They want to control the narrative. And that changes everything. Because no matter how honest, respectful, or vulnerable you are, your words will be twisted. Your tone will be questioned. Your pain will become ammunition in their psychological playbook. It always begins with love, doesn't it? You care about them. You believe in giving grace, offering second chances, assuming the best. And that's exactly what keeps you locked in the loop. Because when you're dealing with someone, manipulative love becomes leverage. Your empathy becomes their access pass. Your desire to resolve becomes a weapon used against you. Let's paint the picture. You express something that hurt you, gently, calmly. You're not attacking, you're just opening up. And what do they say? You're always overreacting. You're too sensitive. I can't do anything right, can I? Just like that, the focus shifts. Now, instead of holding them accountable, you're defending your emotions. You're reassuring them that you're not trying to start a fight. You're backpedaling, clarifying, doubting yourself. Sound familiar? That's not love. That's emotional manipulation disguised as a relationship. And it creates a dangerous loop. You express a need. They twist it into an attack. You feel guilty and retreat. They act like everything is fine until it happens again. And it will happen again, because they're not confused. They're strategic. The more you try to explain, the more they realize this person still wants to be seen. This person still wants my approval. That means I still have power. Here's where you have to pause and ask yourself, am I in a relationship? Or am I in a power game I never signed up for? Because the moment you start arguing, not for truth, but for permission to feel, you've already lost ground. That's why Stoic philosophy is such a powerful antidote to emotional chaos. It teaches you this simple, powerful truth. You are responsible for your mind, not their reactions, not their approval, not their understanding. And if someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no explanation will ever be enough. So stop chasing clarity from people who thrive in confusion. Stop bleeding emotionally for someone who drinks from your peace and spits back poison. The next time you find yourself saying, I just want them to understand, ask yourself, do they really want to understand, or are they just pretending to care long enough to keep control? If the answer is control, your silence will teach them more than your words ever could. Because this isn't about communication, it's about compliance. They're not looking for dialogue, they're testing your limits. They want to know how much pain you'll tolerate, how far they can push, how deeply they can cut before you finally say enough. And until you do, the loop continues. But when you step out of the loop, when you stop explaining, stop proving, stop chasing, you'll realize something powerful. You never needed them to validate your truth. You just needed to believe it yourself. That's where your healing begins. Not in being understood by them, but in finally understanding yourself enough to walk away. So ask yourself today, is this relationship healing you or keeping you in emotional debt? Because someone who loves you won't put you in a position where you have to argue for the right to feel. And someone who values you will never use your feelings as evidence against you. Remember this, you don't owe emotional labor to someone who only gives you confusion in return. You don't owe constant explanations to someone who weaponizes your honesty, and you don't owe your peace to someone who thrives in chaos. Your clarity is your rebellion, your silence is your strength, and your decision to leave the loop is the beginning of your freedom. There's a moment right between the insult and your response where your entire life can shift. That moment, it's called power, and it's not loud. It doesn't scream, it doesn't defend, it doesn't explain, it simply doesn't react. Because here's the truth most people overlook. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every comment needs a comeback. Not every person has earned the right to access your emotional world. Stoic philosophy teaches us this with brutal clarity. Withdraw not out of fear, but out of strength. Let that sink in. We've been conditioned to believe that silence equals weakness, that if you don't fight back, you've surrendered, that if you don't speak up, you've lost. But that's not true. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of self-respect. Let me ask you something. Have you ever gotten into an argument that left you feeling drained, foggy, even ashamed? Not because you were wrong, but because you let someone drag you into their chaos. That's what manipulators want. They want to pull you into the arena where they set the rules, where they twist your words, where they feed off your reactions. But you're not obligated to step into their arena. That's where emotional detachment becomes your armor. See, emotional detachment isn't cold-hearted. It's not about shutting down or becoming numb. It's about choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, boundaries over begging. It's about realizing that you don't have to prove anything to anyone who's already made up their mind about you. When someone is committed to misunderstanding you, every word you speak becomes a weapon they'll twist. So why hand them ammunition? The Stoics taught, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In modern terms, stop trying to justify your boundaries. Live them, honor them. Let your silence be the wall they can't climb. Let your distance be the consequence they never expected. Because here's the truth. When you respond calmly, with no reaction, no defense, you're not being passive. You're being unshakable. You're refusing to fuel the fire they keep trying to start. You're not ignoring the insult. You're rising above it. Because some people don't deserve closure. They deserve silence. And no, that's not cruelty. That's clarity. You're not ghosting. You're protecting your spirit. You're not avoiding the issue. You're refusing to waste your breath on someone who's turned conversation into manipulation. You don't owe explanations to people who weaponize your honesty. You don't owe access to people who exploit your empathy. You don't owe chaos your attention. Let me repeat that. You do not owe chaos your attention. So the next time someone tries to bait you into drama, pause, breathe, don't explain, don't defend, don't engage. Just hold your ground. Let them be confused by your calm. Let them be shaken by your peace. Let them wonder why their old tricks no longer work on you. That moment when they realize they've lost emotional control over you is the beginning of your freedom. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't bleed for people who keep stabbing. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about your sanity than their validation. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who yell the loudest. They're the ones who stay rooted while the storm passes. That's stoicism. That's discipline. That's power. And that's exactly what you reclaim when you stop trying to win arguments and start choosing yourself. Let's talk about something that's hard to admit, especially for those of us who pride ourselves on being kind, patient, and forgiving. Sometimes kindness becomes self-destruction, not because being kind is wrong, but because we gave that kindness to someone who weaponized it. You see, there's a dangerous myth we've all been fed, that if you just love someone enough, they'll eventually change. That if you stay soft, stay forgiving, stay open-hearted, eventually they'll see the light. But what if they don't want to change? What if your kindness doesn't inspire transformation, but gives them permission to stay exactly the same? It's a tough pill to swallow, but here's the truth: you can't heal someone who benefits from staying broken. And manipulators, they know exactly what they're doing. They know how to cry on cue. They know how to say the words, "I'm sorry," not because they mean it, but because they've learned that sorry is a reset button. Apologies become bait, a way to reel you back in just when you were starting to reclaim your peace. Have you ever said to yourself, "I've done so much for them. I've supported them. I gave them chance after chance. Why won't they change?" Here's why: because they don't want to. And more than that, they don't have to, as long as you keep rewarding them with your kindness. This is where Stoicism hits with piercing clarity. The Stoics never said, "Don't be kind." They said, "Be wise in your giving." Because kindness without boundaries isn't virtue, it's self-betrayal. Let me ask you something. What do you call it when you constantly forgive and compromise to someone who shows no intention of changing? That's not love. That's exhaustion. And deep down, you know it. The truth is, manipulators study you. They know which buttons to press, which wounds to poke, and exactly how much guilt to pour on, so you'll keep bending, even when it breaks you. They don't change because your kindness has become currency. They spend it freely without any plan to repay. So what do? You stop mistaking your tolerance for strength. You stop thinking that your empathy is a shield. Because to the wrong person, your empathy is a doorway. And once they know you'll stay, no matter how they treat you, they stop pretending. The Stoics teach us to anchor our kindness in self-respect. Not everyone deserves your compassion, especially not those who turn your decency into leverage. You're not cold for setting boundaries. You're not mean for walking away from repeated disrespect. You're finally being honest about something your heart knew all along. You were never going to change them, but they were slowly changing you. You were becoming more anxious, more doubtful, more depleted, more disconnected from your own worth. And all in the name of being nice. But here's the shift: you don't have to stop being kind. You just have to stop being kind to people who weaponize your kindness. Because kindness, when given wisely, heals. But kindness, when handed to manipulators, hurts you. That's the boundary. The next time someone says, "But I said, I'm sorry," ask yourself, are they showing true change? Or just hitting the reset button? The next time someone calls you cold for walking away, ask yourself, would someone who valued my kindness ever put me in this position to begin with? Here's your reminder: you are not a rehab center for emotional manipulators. You are not a second, third, or 10th chance for someone who's mastered the art of apology without change. You are not responsible for someone else's refusal to grow. The Stoic answer is clear: love others, but never at the cost of abandoning yourself. Because at the end of the day, your kindness should be sacred, not a tool others get to use against you. So stop bleeding just to prove you care, and start protecting the part of you that's been overgiving, overextending, overexplaining. Your peace isn't something to earn, it's something to protect. And the most powerful act of kindness you can show is the one you finally show to yourself. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous tools in a manipulator's arsenal: not rage, not shouting, not even lying outright. It's guilt. Not the kind of guilt that comes from genuine self-reflection or moral compass. No, I'm talking about the engineered guilt, the kind that slowly makes you question your own voice, your boundaries, your right to walk away. See, here's what master manipulators understand. They don't need to tell you you're wrong. They just need to make you feel wrong. And once they succeed at that, you'll do the damage to yourself. You will apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You'll second-guess your intuition. You'll stay in toxic situations out of fear that leaving makes you heartless. And all the while they say things like, "Wow, after everything I've done for you, you've really changed." I guess you never really cared. But let's be clear, this isn't emotional honesty. This is emotional blackmail dressed in sentimental language. They don't need to raise their voice. They just need to raise your self-doubt. And if you're someone who was raised to be kind, understanding, and loyal, you're especially vulnerable to this kind of manipulation. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that guilt means you've done something wrong. That to be a good person, you should always give people another chance, even if it costs you your peace. But here's the Stoic truth. Guilt is not always a signal of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's just residue from being conditioned to put others first even when they never earned it. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Let's reframe that. When you say no, when you set a boundary, when you finally choose peace over people-pleasing, you will face adversity. Internally, that guilt, it will rise like a wave. It'll whisper lies, you're selfish, you're overreacting, you're walking away too soon. But guilt isn't a moral compass, it's a trigger, and manipulators know exactly how to pull it. Here's how the cycle plays out. You try to create distance, you say, "I need space," and they say, "Wow, I knew you'd leave just like everyone else." Suddenly, you're not the one trying to protect your peace. You're the villain in their story. They flip the script so smoothly you start questioning if you're actually the problem. Let me be clear. You are not wrong for needing space. You are not cruel for protecting your energy. And you are definitely not heartless for walking away from someone who drains you. That's not cruelty, that's survival. But manipulative guilt clouds that line. So what's the Stoic solution? Detach from the need to explain. Because explanations are oxygen to a manipulator. They don't listen to understand, they listen to twist. Every sentence you speak becomes clay in their hands. They mold it, reshape it, and throw it back at you. So instead of feeding the cycle, do this. Write down your decision with logic, not emotion. Keep it grounded, keep it clear. Let it be your internal compass when the guilt creeps in. Expect guilt, but don't obey it. Let it come, let it pass. It's just noise, it's not a command. Don't explain your boundaries to people who repeatedly violate them. Your limits are not a group project, they're a declaration of self-worth. Remember, silence is strength. You don't have to defend your healing. You don't have to prove your pain. You don't have to justify your peace. When you start reclaiming your power, they'll say you've changed. They'll call you cold, distant, detached. But the truth is, you're finally living from clarity instead of guilt. And if your peace threatens them, that says more about their intentions than yours. So here's the question to carry with you. Is your guilt coming from your values or from their manipulation? Because knowing the difference is what sets you free. Let's talk about one of the most exhausting roles a good-hearted person can fall into, the fixer. You didn't choose it consciously. It began with empathy, with love, with the belief that if someone is hurting, they deserve support. And you've always been the one willing to show up. You saw their pain, you heard their story, you believed them when they said, "You're the only one who gets me." And slowly, without even realizing it, your heart turned into a full-time rescue mission. But here's the truth. No one likes to admit you're not fixing them. You're fueling them, because some people don't want healing. They want a stage. They don't want accountability. They want attention. And the more you give, the more they take, not to grow, but to keep the spotlight on themselves. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a relationship, a friendship, or even a family dynamic where the other person's pain was always center stage, and your role was to be the therapist, the emotional sponge, the fixer, and no matter how much advice you offered, how many times you forgave, how many late-night calls you answered, nothing changed. In fact, the moment things started improving, they sabotaged it. Sound familiar? That's not misfortune. That's a pattern. And you're not their savior, you're their emotional supply. Because here's what manipulators do brilliantly. They convince you that your worth is tied to how much you can help them. They pull you in with crisis after crisis. I need you. No one else understands. If you leave, I'll fall apart. It sounds like intimacy. It sounds like love. But it's emotional blackmail in disguise. They're not saying stay because I love you. They're saying stay because I can't manage my life and I expect you to do it for me. And if you've got a deep well of compassion, this message hits you right in the heart. Because you want to believe people can change. But here's the Stoic truth. No one changes unless they choose to. Marcus Aurelius didn't say, heal people who don't want to be healed. He said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. In other words, stop trying to fix someone who has no interest in rising. Start focusing on who you are becoming, because while you're pouring into them, you're draining yourself. While you're solving their problems, you're neglecting your own. Let's break the illusion you think you're saving them, but you're actually abandoning you. You're losing sleep over their chaos. You're justifying their behavior to your friends. You're tiptoeing around their moods, changing your needs, lowering your standards, all in the name of helping. But real help requires two willing participants. And if they're not showing effort, if they're not seeking growth, then you're not helping, you're enabling. And it gets worse. The more you give, the less they respect you. Because in their mind, your sacrifices don't signal love, they signal weakness. Look how much I can get away with, they think. This person will never leave. And the second you stop playing your role, they punish you. They accuse you of being selfish. They guilt-trip you into coming back. They spin the story so that you become the villain, all because you finally said enough. But enough is exactly what you need. Not for them. For you. Because at some point you have to realize your job is not to fix people who refuse to lift themselves. Your job is to protect the parts of you that still believe in peace, truth, and mutual growth. And no, walking away doesn't make you heartless. It makes you whole again. It allows you to reclaim the time, energy, and emotional bandwidth that you were bleeding into a one-way relationship. It allows you to pour that same compassion back into your dreams, your well-being, your healing. Here's the perspective shift. It's not your responsibility to carry someone who's chosen to sit in the mud. You can offer a hand. You can point to the path. But if they don't want to walk, don't destroy yourself trying to drag them uphill. Because that's not strength, that's martyrdom, and Stoicism has no room for self-sacrifice that leads to self-erasure. So what do? You detach with dignity. You stop explaining. You stop fixing. You stop showing up to solve crises you didn't create. You say, I wish you healing, but I won't lose myself trying to make you whole. You say, my love is real, but it's not unconditional to my own destruction. You say, I'm done being your mirror. It's time you look at your own reflection. And then you walk not in anger, not in spite, but in clarity. Because people who truly want to change don't need to be chased. They need space. They need silence. They need to meet themselves. And sometimes your absence is the greatest truth you can give. So if you're stuck in the fixer trap, this is your wake-up call. You weren't born to carry other people's emotional baggage. You were born to walk your own path with peace in your heart and your power intact. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing. Not out of fear, not out of surrender, but because silence is the only language that manipulative people cannot twist. And let me explain. When you're dealing with someone who constantly distorts your truth, who pulls you into arguments you never wanted to be in, who spins your words like a magician doing sleight of hand, you'll never win through explanation. You'll never win through defending yourself. Because their goal was never understanding, it was control. And the more you talk, the more material they have to flip the script. So what do? You stop participating in the performance. You walk off their stage. You refuse the role they keep trying to cast you in. Because Stoicism isn't just about stillness. It's about strategic detachment. It's choosing not to fight battles that can't be won. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know what's worth your breath. Let me ask you something. Have you ever left a conversation more confused than when you entered it? You started with a clear thought, something that hurt, something that needed to be said, and by the end you're doubting your memory, your emotions, even your sanity. That's not miscommunication. That's manipulation. And the more you try to clear it up, the deeper they pull you into the fog. So here's the Stoic solution. Don't react. Don't explain. Don't chase clarity from those committed to confusion. Hold your silence like a sword, not to cut anyone down, but to draw a clear, unbreakable boundary. Because people who truly want to understand you don't make you repeat yourself 10 times. They listen the first time, they reflect, they take responsibility. And those who don't, they're not confused. They're just unwilling. So stop bleeding explanations. Stop rehearsing rebuttals in your mind. Stop typing long messages hoping this time they'll finally get it. They won't. Not because you're not clear, but because they benefit from the chaos. So your silence, it becomes a declaration, not "I give up." But I no longer play games I didn't sign up for. You're not ignoring them. You're choosing yourself, your peace, your mental clarity, your emotional safety. Marcus Aurelius said, "You always have the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to trouble your soul over things outside your control." Let that be your mantra. You don't have to have the last word. You don't have to prove them wrong. You don't have to explain why you're walking away. Your exit is the explanation. Because here's the reality. Silence makes manipulators uncomfortable. Why? Because they can't control it. They can twist your words, but they can't twist what you never gave them. They expect your reaction. They crave your emotional outburst. They want to keep you engaged, fighting, fixing, pleading. So when you give them nothing, it's like holding up a mirror they can't avoid. And that reflection, it terrifies them, because they can't blame you if you don't play. They can't shift the narrative if you don't contribute to the story. That's the Stoic strategy. Pull the plug on the performance. Let them talk. Let them twist. Let them tell their version. You don't need to fight for truth when you embody it in your silence. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You don't need to win arguments to win peace. And you definitely don't need to explain your worth to someone who treats it like it's negotiable. Let me say this clearly. If someone only hears you when you scream, they never respected your voice to begin with. So stop yelling to be heard. Start walking in silence and let the absence speak louder than any word ever could. It's not passive. It's powerful. It's not avoidance. It's alignment. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. You don't owe anyone a seat at your table who keeps flipping the dishes. You owe yourself protection. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself the right to heal in silence, with dignity, with strength. Because in the end, the most stoic move isn't to win the fight. It's to refuse to be pulled into one in the first place. Let's end with a truth that many people learn too late. The more you react, the more they control you. And the more you stay silent, the more you reclaim your power. You see, manipulators, narcissists, emotional vampires, whatever name you give them, they don't thrive on love. They don't thrive on peace. They thrive on reaction, anger, confusion, guilt, fear. Those are the currencies they deal in. But silence starves them. Because when you stop playing their game, you take away the only thing they ever really wanted from you, your emotional energy. They may scream louder. They may throw dramatic fits, guilt trip you, or provoke you with lies. But what terrifies them more than anything is your stillness. Because they can twist your words, they can frame your actions, but they can't manipulate what you don't give them. And that's where your true power lives. Stoicism isn't about being cold. It's not about shutting people out. It's about learning that your energy is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. Being emotionally cold, what some call detached, doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've stopped handing your heart to people who only ever used it as leverage. You've stopped leaking your power to those who never intended to honor it. And that's not cruelty, that's self-protection. That's emotional maturity. That's the moment when your boundaries stop being a theory and start becoming your armor. Let me say this clearly. No one has the right to demand that you break your limits just so they can feel more comfortable. No one. And if they do, that's not love. That's manipulation. You are not obligated to shrink to bend or to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. You are not here to sacrifice your mental peace on the altar of someone else's dysfunction. Let me ask you, how many times have you gone to sleep replaying a conversation you didn't need to have? How many times have you second-guessed yourself after setting a boundary? How many times have you explained, defended, justified, only to feel smaller and more disconnected from your truth that ends today? Because the final lesson of Stoicism is not about winning arguments. It's not about proving who's right. It's not about getting them to admit they were wrong. It's about one thing: winning back your inner peace. The Stoic Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." And that's what silence is. Not submission, not passivity, but strength. Measured, calm, rooted in truth. Because when you walk away in silence, when you choose stillness over war, you are declaring to the world, I no longer need to be understood by those who refuse to listen. You are saying, I no longer seek peace from the people who profit from my chaos. And you are finally admitting to yourself, my energy is no longer up for negotiation. That's when healing starts. Not in one final conversation, not in a perfectly worded message, but in the quiet moments after, when your soul exhales and you realize you're finally free. So if you've been struggling to let go, if you've been clinging to explanations, closure, or one last chance to make them understand, let this be your moment of clarity. You don't owe them anything, not your pain, not your performance, not your peace. You owe you. You owe yourself the chance to rebuild, to rest, to rediscover who you were before their chaos entered your life. And when that silence starts to feel uncomfortable, when you're tempted to break it just to feel seen again, remind yourself, some people don't deserve a response. They deserve your absence and your silence. It is not emptiness. It is presence. It is power. It is your sharpest sword. So carry it not with bitterness, but with grace, not with revenge, but with wisdom, not to hurt them, but to protect you, because at the end of the day, you don't need to win the fight. You just need to walk away with your dignity intact, your peace guarded, and your spirit untouched. That is what Stoic strength looks like. That is how you rise.